Why do we care about wet floors anyway? I mean, what's the problem at plating facilities? I mean, soil contamination, is that the only problem? Where do you think most of I've been to releases. I have yet to be to a site that's actually undergoing active remediation. I've been to several that are in the slow-moving process of corrective action. But the majority of releases I've seen have come on the emergency response side. It's been heaters that have been going at night and overheat. It's been faulty electrical. It's been fires in melting tanks. Those are some of the problems we have at plating facilities too. So as I go through here, it would have been nice if I could have some pictures from the ERs, but they always happen at night, and the pictures are just horrible at night. I mean, someday I'll put together some and show you in here, like from an emergency response aspect of some of the problems we deal with. How about some of the other problems? What about incompatibles? Yeah, cyanides, right? I got a criminal trial for cyanides and acids coming up, so they must be, that must be a big deal. So I'm going to take you through and show you, and as I show you these pictures and we start moving through, I just want you to be able to recognize a problem from an environmental perspective, and then we'll point out a few things maybe for your own health and safety from a safety perspective. But then I'll show you some pictures of solutions and ways shops can design their shop so that they can avoid all this extra regulation requiring secondary containment for their secondary containment because they spill too much. As we go through the rest of the slides here, I think it'll be real clear that there's only one real option. We listed out 5 options for you of things that you could do. But when you really get down to it, the only real option is to prevent all the spills you can through engineering and work practice controls. And then when you do, if you do have spills, then clean them up right away. Because if you're continually accumulating or you're always spilling, then whatever you're spilling into is probably part of a tank or tank system subject to some type of assessment, and that's a world you might not want to be in depending on the design of your system. So here's a picture of one of my sites, and you see this, and I hear, oh, my floor here is designed for emergency containment, so I'm okay. And my question there right at the bottom, well, how often are you having emergencies here? Because it looks like it's routinely. If it's routinely like this, then they're not emergencies, and they need to plan better. So, as an inspector, sometimes, unfortunately, you got to get down there and really look, right? If you don't look, you're not going to find it, like Terry said. Now, it's going to be hard for this area to ever really comply because you can see it's all pitted out. They're constantly having liquids in here. Are they hazardous? Probably. I don't know. I didn't check this one for hazardous waste characteristic, but I'd say, by the way, the floor is kind of deteriorating and the metal, it looks hazardous to me. So they've got to make some changes here, but they need to look here. So is this ever okay? If you're in a metal finishing facility or any facility where they're using chemical baths and have spillage, is there any way that we can say, even with our floor guidance policy, that is okay? I don't think you can, because there's no way they cannot be continually accumulating or storing, and here is my evidence. So the evidence to support my side as an inspector is you've got this etching, it's this pitting, and I take that sample and show it's hazardous, and I'm going to say, sorry, whatever your procedures are, they're not good enough. You're going to have to do a little bit better engineering and then implement your floor management program. So, this is kind of common. You see the salts after it dries up. You got to ask the question, how often do you clean up your floor? Oh, we clean it up every day at the end of the day. Does that look like they clean it up every day? Well, how are you cleaning your floor? You've got to ask the questions as you go out there, and you've got to get your businesses to answer, and you've got to get them to commit to what they do or what they don't do. Now, this is a facility that went out of business. This is what it looked like when they pulled out all the tanks. I I didn't see the assessment on this, but I know I went back out there a couple years later, and there's a new layer of concrete over the whole surface now. So now they've did something, and now it's all concrete. There's a new business there now. So all I've got is a referral to DTSC. We don't have corrective action authority yet in San Diego. Does anyone here have corrective action authority locally? I think it's just LA. LA, yeah. Okay. So again, back to looking around, looking at the facility. So ask them the questions. Okay, where does all your piping go? All this stuff that goes into your sumps, how does it get piped back? Where's it go? Can I take a look at the piping? So here's an acid copper dump. Here's where the floor spills end up. Nice and labeled for you. What is all this green stuff, and how did it get here? And you can see corrosion. Maybe they're cleaning it up daily, but I'm going to guess not. Why are we trying to get them to clean it up daily? Or within 8 hours, I should say. What did we kind of agree to? That we're not going to call it discarded or relinquished if they can show you that they're cleaning up their floor and that it's, I guess, more material-like than waste-like. So they've got to have some way to show you that they're cleaning this up. And we've kind of come to this agreement through DTSC, the CUPA, the Southern California Metal Finishers, that if they do this and they implement this and they do it every 8 hours, that we're not going to call it relinquished, therefore not discarded and therefore not a waste. However, if their processes are built so bad that all they do is spill on the floor all the time, then I think an inspector could show, hey, look, you're not meeting the intent of this give and take here. So how about this? Let's say this is hazardous. Let's say it's hazardous waste, pH 1.5. Where do you fit this in the world of the regulations? This trench under here. Is it ancillary equipment, a sump, a tank? Is it an underground storage tank subject to Title 23? You're not going to know unless you ask the questions, a lot of questions, and you're not going to know what questions to ask unless you look around. You can see they, again, pulled off the floor. Here's where everything sits. Is it lined? Is it part of a PE-assessed containment system and ancillary equipment? Maybe. Sometimes I find that PEs assess these kind of sumps. So, from the inspector standpoint, just wanted to put up here some of my concerns for people. I didn't know if anyone in the class would be out there and not have any experience, but I did want to say, you want to think about this. Is it safe for you guys to enter? Is it safe for the employees to be in there the way they're working? Is it safe for the public? If it's not, you might have to come back. You might have to leave. Do their processes have off-site impacts? Can you see liquid oozing down the street? Where are the potentials for releases? From the slides I showed you, where pretty much are all the potential for releases? Yeah, soil, right? So any low-lying area, any cracks in the floor, generally sumps, right? Sumps, underground, below-ground tanks or conveyance. How hazardous are the chemicals? And then lastly, are they in compliance or not? And if not, then I have to do enforcement. So just going back to this whole policy we're talking about, it's when is it a waste? And if you clean it up within 8 hours, we're going to say, well, you're probably not a waste if you've got these procedures in place. You have to do the waste determination. So say it is a waste, you've got to know, is it hazardous, right? So what types of metals are you putting in your process tanks? What types of finishes are you putting on there? Is it a chroming or nickel process? How are they doing the parts? Is it manual or automated? That's going to possibly impact how much drag out comes out. I mean, you got to look at their whole process, right? How are they removing the oxidation? How do they physically clean the parts? Do they pull them out, dip them in the tank, spray them off, and it goes all over the floor? Or do they spray them over an empty rinse tank that can collect it all and then go to the treatment system? And which one would you prefer? Obviously the one that's all contained, right, within the tank. Then you get recycling. Now, not seeing a whole lot of recycling out there other than chem film processes and countercurrent rinses. Does anyone see any other recycling out there on a routine basis? For water? Scrubbers? Okay. So if they're doing recycling, they can have some different allowances, possibly a little bit of reduction of regulation, but you got to figure out the process. If they're recycling something, it's a waste, right? I mean, we showed you the definition of waste, but there's some conditions they can meet and be excluded from a waste. So if you have a leak, when do they notice it? So hopefully they've got their inspection logs. They show you, okay, look, every end of the shift, here's our inspection. If we see a leak, we send, the next crew is going to take care of the leak and before we get started. Perfect. How do they clean up the drag out? How often? Where does it all go? Back into process or waste? I mean, majority of it we're seeing, all the drag out ends up getting sucked into a tank or some type of container system, whether they're doing on-site treatment or they're just putting it into totes. I have a facility that somehow finds it cheaper to just keep putting everything in totes. And all their cleanup every day and their rinses, they just put them in totes and send them off-site. And tons of manifests. Maybe they haven't got the okay from their sewer discharge for where they're at. But anyway, is it a waste? Usually it's a waste. And then we already talked about listed. You got to consider that. So the last part is the characterization. Once you've determined it's a waste, how do you characterize it? And again, back through, what are your point of generation? It's a hard thing when I'm talking to a business owner and they're looking at all the stuff that ends up in their collection tank. And they go, no, I took a sample. Look, it's not hazardous. I mean, in their mind, that's the waste, right? But for what we're doing, it's every point in the process you've got to look at. Each rinse tank, each process tank, whatever is going into your system. And then how do they do it? Knowledge, tests, they have documentation. If not, get ready to grab a sample. So here we go. This is what I thought was a good tank system. Facility had some collection in place. It goes from rinse tanks, it's piped over, comes in, and nice, clean, and dry. Right? How hard can it be? Now, because it's in a vault, you got to make sure they're not in the underground tank world, right? And meeting their vaulted tank exemption requirements. That's a whole nother 2 hours. This is a facility that tries really hard to comply. I think it's designed well. They take long rods and they dip them into the processes. And these are their process tanks. They're all elevated above ground so you can see them. They clean up every day. Every time I come out there, I can't find liquid on the ground. So they've got a PE assessment. They're calling the floor part of the just secondary containment. It's got a coating. The PE likes it. I'm happy. You look around, you say, well, when do they have to look at the lining on their floor again? And again, it's secondary containment. So, I don't know. Would someone think this is a problem on their inspection? Could be. Depends. I mean, you got a few questions to ask them. In this case, they were about due for their PE assessment again, and I'm hoping next time I go out, they've at least touched it up a little bit.
And the PE assessment is under health and safety code, fire code?
So the PE assessment, when you hear us referring to the professional engineer's assessment, that is for a hazardous waste tank system, and I can go back, right?
Okay.
So in the back, these are process tanks. Now they've got some rinse tanks over to collection tank through treatment process over to evaporator. Because they're evaporating, it's hazardous for chromium. They're pulled into permit by rule. So large quantity generators, conditionally authorized and permit by rule treatment facilities are required to have secondary containment and full PE assessment of their hazardous waste tank system.
And that's because their treatment system is on that floor. It's also
Yeah.
used as secondary.
Yes, it's within the same area. So that's why they have that here. Good? Okay. This one here I put in because I was just confused when I went out here. It's a chem film wastewater recycling. They claim exclusion under Health and Safety Code 5143.2C. And they say, no, it's countercurrent, goes back. And they say closed loop, but it's not closed loop. If it was an entirely closed loop system, they would qualify for pretty much exemption from the whole world of waste requirements, but they're not meeting those requirements. So when they claim that, even though it's recyclable material, they still have to do their full hazardous waste container or tank standards. So all generator requirements apply. They can do all the treatment, recycling, processing they want. All generator standards are going to apply, and in this case, that meant PE assessment again. This is the Naval Aviation Depot at North Island. They're for all the aircraft parts. These are 2,000 to 3,000 gallon each tank. Not too many facilities this big. Look at the air handling. Crazy systems. And I'll show you what it looks like. Above ground view. Lots of good chemicals in here. And as you're going around, you see the floors like this. So, okay, where does all your drag out go? Well, they're actually pretty good. You can see each one of those there. What do you call those? Tank covers, tank guards. All the drag out's going right back into the process or possibly rinse tank. So they're pretty good. So let's go down and look underneath the shop. I can walk through here without hitting my head. So this is a large area. And I see staining here and there, but everywhere I stick my pH strip, I get neutral. So they kind of probably knew I was coming. Security purposes, right? So they either didn't do much that morning or they really do clean up. Terry talked about doing multiple inspections to really see how these places look and implementing their floor management program. Are the floors dry? And I don't see a way around it. If it's not dry, you're going to have to go back out. So you're going to have to do that in accordance with your local procedures for re-inspections or however you want to handle that. But I really don't see any way around not going back out to really figure out if they're in compliance. Now I'll get to some not so good. Here's my guy. He's doing a bunch of spraying. He's spraying off some parts here. This is, once it gets outside of there, it's outside and down the storm drain over here. They're doing aluminum anodizing, and I think it's a chrome black stain here. So good, bad, not so good here, right? So this is not part of the process floor. This is now outside their business. So if that's hazardous waste, who knows what violation they would cite on their report, at a minimum. What's that? Right, facility not being maintained, operated to minimize release. At a minimum. 40 CFR if a small quantity generator, and 22 if they're a large quantity. So inside the shop, he was so proud to show me these nice plastic trays that he's put in. And it's kind of hard to see the outline, but they're long and they go around everywhere there's space inside of a secondary containment. But they're all containing liquid. He said, oh, this just catches my spills. Well, when do you clean them out? Oh, I clean them out every day. Yeah, right. Okay. Well, it's a good try here, but what's really happening is it's really kind of just hindering him from being able to clean his floor up real nice. So with a little bit of work and a hose down at the end of the week, his shop did look better. So what if they hose it down? Can they do that? Does anything say they can't? Is it treatment? No, I'm just kidding. So sometimes the only way to probably clean these out could be to hose them down. Obviously, they're going to generate more waste. So they don't want to do that very often, but they have to be able to inspect their floor. They have to see if there's cracks or not. They're allowed to put water on the floor, but they have to know, they can have all the water they want on the floor. There's nothing you can do about that unless they now don't have adequate secondary containment. But they're not going to be able to tell if there's releases. So reflection, bad.
Don't they use that to inspect the underside of the grate?
That is good. Yeah. The bottom of the grate is in good shape. I haven't heard that one yet. I had a note here on my slides. I was going to try and tie this back to the policy, but I think we already talked about it. If this is like this every day, and this containment's always holding, even if they've got a program in place, if they're not following that program, or if they spill all day, but then clean it up at the end of the 8-hour shift and then starts spilling again, then really it's always holding hazardous materials or waste. And that's where you've got to work with them, you've got to ask the questions, you've got to check their inspection records and procedures, and really help them implement some better management practices, because they're either a hazardous materials or a hazardous waste containment or tank system right there. So they show me the shop vacuum. Oh yeah, here's what I use to suck out my nice little plastic trays. I'm like, really? That works? How often are you going through your shop vacs? He said, oh, about every 3 months. Buy a new one. Seems to work good. I'm a little hesitant to tell anyone or encourage them to use a shop vac, because what are your problems? Yeah, electrical. And you've also, you're sucking air in and exhausting air out, so you could be, blowing out some hazardous liquids. For safety purposes, I probably wouldn't recommend it, but it seems to be effective. Good old-fashioned mops for small jobs works for me. How do they label that? pH 1. I don't know. I don't empty it when you're done. So I did come back. He said, oh no, here's what we do. At the end of every day, what time do you work? Well, we come in at 5, we're here till 2:30. Okay, I believe you, sure. Show up the next day at 2:30 and, probably because I just came out the day before, he thought he'd live up to his word. But better, shows me that he is doing what he says he is. All right, now I'm going to show you a shop that is definitely not good. We've got some time here. And he ended up, I'll show you the samples and stuff. He ended up spending, it took a lot of work. He spent one night in jail. And he does whatever you ask him to do now. Definitely left an impression. So, kind of hard to tell. So there's the outside of the building. Here is a plating shop, bunch of process tanks, some caustic cleaners over here, chem film, some dye tanks on this side. You can't see. I think those are like acid anodized. Wow. That's his floor. Looks nice and wet, right? Where's everything going? So who makes their businesses lift up the floor duct boards and show them underneath? Okay. I try not to make them do anything, because naturally they'll get hurt or do something stupid, and my supervisor will be yelling at me. Try and just ask them to show me how you get down there. Oh, really? Clean up your floor? Okay, well, show me how you do that. How do you get down there? Oh, really? Oh, nice. What's it look like? Oh, see, we got all these pipes, and it takes the stuff over to our collection tanks and pumps out to the outside treatment system. Okay, well, let's take a look. Where's the tank? Oh, it's right here. Well, what's all that? Well, that's my secondary containment. All right. Can't see the floor. Not too good, if you can see a reflection. And it turned out to be that this tank is about 4 feet tall. So there's about 2 feet of liquid in here. They have a manually operated pump. They had outsmarted their professional engineer when he set it up and went in and put in a relay and a switch on the wall. And now they just pump out the sump when they feel like it. So, new duct boards. Wow. So who thinks that's a sign of a good business? They have new duct boards, right? I mean, they're changing them out. So, yeah, why do you need all these new duct boards, and where were they going? In his case, he got in trouble that he took all the duct boards outside and just set them outside. And you go outside and there's all the duct boards, and there's a streak over to the storm drain. So samples, high, low pH, pH 1, metals. We took him through administrative enforcement on that. I think he paid $15,000 and made a bunch of improvements. So they started pumping it out naturally. Inspector was there and looking. They're going to clean it. They activate the pump and clean it out, but it's still. I mean, they did not design facilities in the old. This was built in the 50s. They're not designed for environmental compliance. I don't see how he can. I mean, they try their best. You just can't comply. So, vault submerged in wastewater. How often do you pump it out? Is there always liquid down here? Why would you ask that? Why would you ask, how often do you pump it out? Is there always liquid? What are you trying to establish? Is it a waste, right? Because now we've got this little bit of give and take in this floor management program. So, we're letting kind of saying, okay, well, you can, if you have a little bit of spillage, but you have this great program in place, we're not going to call it a waste. Well, if it's there all the time, every day, then it is, and it goes from here into the hazardous waste treatment system, it's a waste, and that is, their secondary containment is subject to full tank standards, and, well, they can't do that, so they got to make some upgrades. So again, they've got this nice black chrome tank here. It's leaking. They put a coffee can, they catch some of it, the rest goes down underneath the floor. I mean, they put it there until it overflowed, and
But doesn't that put out the cigarette and some fire?
That's my pH strip. It looks like a cigarette butt, but the cigarette butts are over by where they put the coatings on in the flammable area.
Need a bigger coffee can.
It does look better now. I don't have any pictures of this place looking all better. Maybe next time I go out. So because they were so nice, and I told them I was going to help them. I was going to help them characterize the waste for them because I'm a nice guy. So let me help you. Here, I'll give you the sample jar, and you help me collect the samples down in that stuff. Oh, all right, great. Yeah, thanks. So again, black dye rinse leaking down. It's a point of generation. You got to show waste from the point of generation going in the pit. Sulfuric acid anodized, spilling all over the floor, basically causing everything on the floor. Naturally came back at 2.1 because it's all commingled. But I thought I did a good enough job showing that the reason it's 2.1 is because some of it is below 2, and therefore hazardous waste. Chem film. Another point of generation, this is a cleaning rinse tank and piped over the waste treatment system. So we just went through, you see the mess, and you're like, you know what? I'm here, I got to take samples. But I knew I'd have a hard time showing that commingled wastewater would still be hazardous waste characteristic. Therefore, each point of generation going in. This was actually nice because it's a drag-out collection pan. He made this after the first kind of enforcement get-together. They put them all over the shop. They capture some of the drag-out, and then it goes into there, into the pipe, and over to treatment. But it was so gunked up, salted up, it was ineffective. So it had just started spilling out over the top. Sample. This is nice. I mean, if they don't have a whole tank to spray off a part in, I mean, this is better. This beats doing it on the floor and intentionally introducing hazardous material waste onto your floor surface from rinsing off your part. This is good, but an actual whole tank would be better. And by the end of the inspection, sump, pH 3. A little drier. I mean, floor's not wet anymore. Who thinks this is okay, though? I don't know. It's better. They got it dry. They've cleaned it up a little bit since then. But if they're having all this going on the duct boards, it's showing me that they're continually letting stuff fall on the floor, drip on the floor, accumulate, be stored down there. So I think they need to do better, or their waste. So just had this one a few months ago. Plating shop decided to stop paying his rent. Found a better place down the street. Moved all his chemicals down the street a quarter mile, where they've been sitting since July 1st. And he has not been in operation, and all his chemicals are just sitting there. Because once he moved, he got kicked into all the new fire codes, building codes, air pollution control for chroming, and now he's in a world of hurt. And this site, there are cracks. Let's see if I can get any better. Oh, you can kind of see. So DTSC has already got their corrective action. They've already come out and looked at it. The business owner was trying to hurry up and get it done, it's not going to be fast. There's a lot of contamination. So that was some of the bad. This is where we're getting them to now. This is Dale Watkins' shop. You may have heard of, Sheffield Plating. He comes. He's the one that helped work with Jim Milley and the Southern California Metal Finishers Association, put together that document that you see there in front of you. He is one of the facilities that calls up our hazmat response team and says, hey, come on out, take a look at what we do, how we do it, take a look. But he didn't have to. He went back and he was doing some upgrades, coated the floor. In addition to coating the floor, put this whole plastic containment underneath all the tanks, process tanks. Also got these grates up so they can work safely, so the employees can work safe. But they have to pop them out and clean up every day. It's not my site. The inspector that was out there last time said he looked as hard as he could in the whole shop and he found this much liquid on the floor. So I think it can be done. And part of the reason is how you operate. How do you move from one tank to the next? How do you set up your system to be able to, one, not spill, and two, if you do spill, clean it up? So this is just showing some of the things he fabricated to put the tanks on so they're standing up. You can clean underneath them. Oh, that's for the floor grates, between the tanks, sorry. And then you can get in there. Good housekeeping through engineering. All right, that's a lot of information. Any questions, comments? Worthwhile, not worthwhile? See some pictures? Okay. Would you rather see emergency response photos? That'd be more exciting. Pictures of burnt up plastic tanks that melted and leaked all over.
I had a question. You ever refer people to like codes enforcement? Because whenever I go into places like that, there's like they've rewired everything. Sorry,
I was just saying that we'll sometimes, if we have problems with guys, refer them to codes enforcement. I mean, you can also call OSHA. It looks like there's a lot of workplace hazards there that probably aren't regulatable, but
that's a good question. Yeah, please, thanks for coming. If you got to go, please fill out the survey. But to answer your question, there are a lot of referrals you might want to make, people you want to know if you're doing inspections in your area. The wastewater treatment facilities in our area, the wastewater inspectors do a great job drawing up process flows, descriptions, even maps of how things operate, which can help us figure out what they need to do to comply with Title 22. Codes enforcement, the new place that he went to, I've been talking to their codes enforcement officer, and it's very difficult for a new shop to get up and running. And he's not grandfathered in at the new shop. Right. He was grandfathered in for his, SIC code, or anyway, wastewater discharge at the old facility, so not anymore. Anything else? All right. Enjoy the conference. You got anything to say? All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.